Hello, my beautiful friends. I am Laurel Bleadon-Maffei with Illuminating Souls, welcoming you to this episode of Sleepy Bedtime Blessings, a podcast designed to help you rest, relax, and fall asleep, all while deepening in your connection with your beautiful team of angels who love you so. It is so lovely to welcome you here to this broadcast. So if we're meeting for the first time, I will introduce myself. I am an angelic practitioner, a spiritual teacher, and an encourager of souls. And I do this through one-on-one angel sessions, soul mentoring, and a variety of classes designed to inspire your spirit. I offer new classes about every 6 weeks, and they're typically small in size. So if you love the idea of getting to meet each week with a sweet group of other heart-centered, beautiful souls, and connect with the angels on a more intimate basis, I invite you to reach out to me and I will make sure you get on the mailing list. I also have a daily inspiration email blast that I send out every weekday that you can sign up for, and I post every day to Facebook. So lots of ways that we can connect. But for now, the angels and I are here to help you come into a sweet and soothing place where you can rest and relax. And this podcast is inspired by two of my favorite forms of self-care: connecting with the beautiful angels in their divine light, and listening to sleep podcasts. I listen to a sleep podcast every night, and it helps me navigate that place between my waking mind, which can be busy sometimes, and coming into that beautiful gateway into that sweet mystery of sleep. If you're new to the world of podcasts, what I recommend is that you turn the volume down lower than you would if you were listening to an audiobook. I love audiobooks, and when I listen, I pay attention. So I have the volume up in such a way that I can hear everything. With a sleep podcast, I turn the volume down a bit lower because it's not as important that I get every word. My preference is to keep the volume down just low enough that I have to try to pay attention, because if I do, at some point I will drift off. So that is why I have created this podcast for you, in hopes that the forms of self-care that work for me will be of value to you as well. So this episode will be about an hour long. My preference as a listener of sleep podcasts is I prefer content that is at least an hour long. And if it falls within the 50-minute mark, 50 minutes to an hour 10, that works for me too. Because some of my episodes don't quite make it to an hour, but they will always be at least 50 minutes long. I see some sleep podcasts and meditations, they're 10 or 15 minutes, which are terrific if that's what you're looking for. But for me, as someone who is seeking specifically to fall asleep, that's too much pressure. Even though most of the time I am out within 20 minutes, I like to know I have plenty of time. So we're going to be here a while. And the way this podcast is designed is we talk for a little bit. I bring in the angels. Usually we talk about something spiritually focused. And that goes for about the first 15 to 20 minutes or so. And then we come to story time. And story time is a bit of a mix-up. It can be something that I read to you that's in the public domain. I might tell you stories from my own life. We might flip through an old periodical or cookbook and muse about its content. So it's a little bit of a mix-up. Each episode's a little bit different. And if you are enjoying this podcast, if you would consider leaving a review, that would be awesome. Or telling a friend about it. We're growing by word of mouth, so I so appreciate your support. So I thought we might chat a little bit about the concept of home, especially when it comes to the angels and light work. I experience home in a lot of different ways. I certainly experience the physical home. This is the home I share with my husband, and the energy here is beautiful. It is what we want it to be. This is where I do my angel sessions and my classes and my podcast. And so there is the physical expression of home. And then there is the expression of home that we might have in a relationship or in our hearts, right? I've gotten that experience of home with my animals, with friends who feel like home. I would always feel that beautiful sense of home with my parents, both when I would talk to them on the phone or visit them in person. And then there is the concept of vibrational home. And that's what I wanted to explore with you in this moment. When I first went through my awakening, which was pretty much from 2000 to about 2002, I became aware of this deep sense of homesickness that I felt for life beyond this reality. And I've come to learn this is pretty common. So many of us are brought up with this concept that we live our life here and then we get to go home, right? It's like heaven. We get to reunite with God, and all of this really good stuff happens when we are no longer alive, right? That we somehow have to get through the next 80 years or so, and then we get to have this very expansive experience, which I believe in. But I also know that it set me up for a deep longing for an experience that I was not having here in my earthly life. So this really started becoming more present for me in terms of my own awareness. And I used to cry it out. That was part of my shedding the layers of the old consciousness I no longer wished to embody. And I would feel the homesickness and I would cry it out in the shower. And I would let that longing come up in me because it felt as if I was going through some sort of calibration or detox. And then one day, the angels came to me. And when I say that, I don't want you to think that this apparition showed up at the end of my bed. Quite often, my experience with the angels is that this clarity of thought comes to me, like a revelation. You know, when you're wandering through your mind and this thought comes in, sort of like, hey, you know what? You know what I should do? I should, and then fill in the blank. And it comes with its own energy pack, its own light battery of sorts. So when I say the angels came to me in this story, it really was divine awareness and divine thought, not an apparition that I could see or a voice I could hear. I feel that it's really important to share that with you so that the kinds of experiences that I have might feel more accessible to you. So the angels came to me. I will say I had divine thought come in that felt expansive. It felt like an invitation. And this is what the thought was. So I would translate into, and this is what they said. So the angels said, you have it wired, that you can't have a life here that feels like home. And I could feel the absolute truth of that. And they said, here's what we recommend. You say to God, God, help me create a life here that feels like home. I don't know what that will look like, but I know that you know. It was such a sweet morsel of guidance and inspiration, because when that flowed through me, I knew it as truth. I did have it wired. You know, I did have the belief that I couldn't create a life here that would feel like home. And I had no concept what that might look like. So when that flowed through, that became my prayer. God, help me create a life here that feels like home. And I don't know what that will look like or feel like, but I know that you know. So please help me. And so when I would feel that homesickness, I would pivot into that prayer. And usually I know in a story like this is where I would insert some magical thing that happens within a week that changes my life forever. And I will say that's not how it happened. It was very, very subtle. But it felt like a gateway opened. And probably within a year or two of that prayer, my life had changed. And I will say that my life now, I feel like I'm home. It's not that I feel like my earthly life would be like whatever expression of consciousness we have when we depart earth plane. But I no longer feel homesick for an expression of my beingness that is inaccessible to me. Like I love my life now. I love being here on the earth plane. This life is a blessing. And I also remember when I first took a channeling class, I also had that fear, would channeling make me feel more homesick? Like somehow I lost a coin toss and I was here and my guides were there. And my teacher at the time channeled a lovely message for me and said, no, it'll actually make it feel more like home. And that also has been my truth. That connecting with the angels every day, getting to bring this love forward for you, has created a beautiful matrix of light that is my life. So I want to share this with you, that the concept of home is multidimensional. It can be your physical home. It can be the home of your heart. It can be your spiritual home. And my hope is that this podcast will begin to feel like a little sliver of home for you. You know, when I contemplate home, I think of it as a place that feels cozy, where I am welcome, where I can sink in and I am cherished. And my hope is this sanctuary that we co-create together with each episode can serve as that for you. That this is a place where you are cherished and that has been and will be created for you. And the angels bring their light in, and it is always calibrated just for you. The kind of energy and light that flows through for you might be calibrated differently than another listener gets, because the angels know what's going on for you in your life. So the angels are already here, and I'm going to invite them in because I love sharing them with you in this way. So I invite you to take a nice deep breath into your beautiful body and release. And if you're preparing for bed, that you can cozy on up and snuggle on in. And I will bring the angels forward for you. So beautiful angels on high, thank you for welcoming us here, and I ask that you join us here now. I ask that you bring waves of divine love to each of our beloveds listening now. And angels, I ask that you help each one of us connect with divine love in a way that helps us feel that beautiful vibration of home. So just take a nice deep breath in. And if you do like the sound of that prayer, we will bring it in here. God, help us create lives that feel like home. To help each of our beloveds here create, manifest, experience life in such a way where they know they are treasured, they are cherished, they are precious, that the divine light makes its presence known in the most beautiful of ways. Help each of our beloveds open more deeply to their divine gifts and abilities, to bring to them experiences and relationships that are deeply fulfilling. And angels, I ask that you help to clear from us anything that is not ours, and replace this with blessings of love, with miracles, with inspiration, and with goodness. And just take another deep breath in. And just allow yourself to connect with divine source energy. I always see this in my mind's eye or my imagination as a column of golden light that descends from on high, from the heavens, from the angelic realm, if you will. And it comes into the crown chakra and this pure divine source energy. And it fills us up much like a pitcher of water would fill a tall vessel, allowing this divine source energy to flow to you as it helps to calibrate, as it helps to replenish, and just allow yourself to receive. There's nothing you need to do in this moment. Just receive. And the angels are showing me that they are doing some clearing around the back of your neck and your shoulders and your upper back. This is often where we store stress energy. So just allow this beautiful column of light to soothe your back and your neck and your shoulders, helping to clear and release any stress or heaviness or tension that you might have been carrying there, letting it be soothed away. And just breathe, allowing your body to receive this light. As this light travels down your back, down to your lower back, again, the clearing is taking place. Just receive. There is so much love for you right here and right now. Just breathe it in and let the love flow to you. So with your permission, if you would like it to be so, the angels will stay with you and continue bringing this clearing and healing energy to you. And you can drift off at any time. And while you rest, I'm going to keep you a little bit distracted, a little amused with our story time. So this may seem like an odd segue from talks of home, this beautiful divine source energy, but it's story time now, and this is always where we pivot a little bit. And so we're going to go from very celestial, etheric energies to total earthy goodness. Because, my friends, I have another old TV guide to flip through for you. So if you've been listening for a long time, you know I love television. It was one of the things that helped me relate to earthly life. like earth life, my earth girl life did not always delight me. Shocking, I know. And I loved television because it created this world that was deeply expansive, far beyond my day-to-day ordinariness of earth girl life. And I don't mean this in some cosmic, like I loved sci-fi stuff. I just mean there were characters, there were stories that existed beyond my own reality. And I loved television. So the issue that I have is from May of 1976. So let's set the stage. First off, I'll share with you what was happening in my life. So I would have just turned 14 years old, and I would be wrapping up the 8th grade. I think we probably graduated in June, so maybe I was on my last few weeks of being in grammar school, and high school would come the next year. I'm still sharing a room with my sister. I wouldn't get my own room until I was 16 years old, so my sister and I are still sharing a room. In terms of the culture at that point. We had just come through Watergate here in the US. I can't do a global assessment, but I will talk about what was happening here in the United States. So Gerald Ford is our president at this point, and we are heading into the November 1976 elections between Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter. And we are on a bicentennial frenzy. Everything is about this being 1976. Because 1776 was, the Declaration of Independence. So the world is awash in patriotism. Red, white, and blue, everything. Flags are on everything. We are a patriotic hot mess at this point in history. So this issue has a very lovely picture of Cindy Williams and Penny Marshall, better known as Laverne and Shirley, on the cover. And so we will start flipping through the pages together. Okay, so we flip open to quite a number of cigarette ads. Cigarette ads were quite the thing back then, and some articles that I'm not going to go into because I didn't find them all that fascinating. But the part that I want to share with you is an ad for the Kodak Tele-Instamatic camera. How many of you remember the Instamatic cameras? They were shaped sort of like a video cassette, right? So they were flatter than regular cameras, so you could put them in a pocket. And this one had like a telephoto lens. So it says take 2 different kinds of pictures with the Kodak Tele-Instamatic 608 camera because it has 2 lenses built right inside, a normal lens and a telephoto lens. And it's a pocket size and it has a flip flash. It's less than $39. I definitely remember having an Instamatic camera in our family. I don't know that it was mine. And I remember those little cartridges of film. So I didn't have a 35 millimeter camera. I had one of these guys that we used at some point. So a little flashback there. There is also a Tampax ad with very happy looking women, and one of them is wearing white pants. So a little subliminal advertisement there. They're happy, they're busy, they're clearly in an office, so they get to be very modern women with modern protection. Yay for the evolution of this part of a woman's life. All right, now we come to this week in movies. And so a couple of interesting movies are airing. One is On a Clear Day You Can See Forever. I totally forgot about this movie, and I don't know that I have seen it in decades. I might have to go look it up again. So here's what they say about this movie. It's with Barbra Streisand, just so you know. Streisand came into her non-funny girl own in the 1970s on A Clear Day You Can See Forever. So she plays a girl who wants to give up cigarette smoking, and she goes to a hypnotherapist played by Yves Montand. And because of the hypnosis, she becomes clairvoyant and has past life regressions. So it says here she goes through 15 past lives. Now I think that would be fascinating. I don't think I had any relationship to the reincarnation aspect when I saw this. I don't know, however many years ago, 40 years ago, 45 years ago. But I'll have to go check that movie out. I haven't seen it, as I said, in a long time. They're also going to be showing 1971's The Andromeda Strain by Michael Crichton. which as I recall was a kind of scary movie about a plague. That's what we need right now. I'll be skipping that one. Thank you very much. We start off, as every TV guide does, with Saturday morning cartoons, which at 14 I was probably not terribly interested in. At this point, I was not likely going to Saturday school or Sabbath school, as we called this, as a Jewish girl. So I was probably home, but sleeping. If I'm 14 years old, I am not up before 11 a.m. for sure. And the only thing that I am recognizing here is a rerun of Flipper. I don't know how many of you remember Flipper, but it was a show about a dolphin. So I wouldn't have been up at that point, I don't think, though. Oh, Zoom is airing. I loved Zoom. I won't sing the song. But do we all now know, at least here in the US, that one of the zip codes in Boston is 02134 because of Zoom? So I loved Zoom growing up. Okay, so we get to 7 p.m. and this is an Ohio TV guide, so their prime time would not start until 8 p.m. So the 7 p.m. hour is still not quite yet prime time. But if I had to watch television at this hour, there would be nothing on I would want to see, because on one station, they're airing a special called Presidents, 76 Years on Camera. I would have no interest in that. At this point, I'm fed up with the bicentennial. I remember that being 14 years old and just being ready to be done with red, white, and blue everything. I would not have watched that, although my parents might have. Lawrence Welk. Okay, in our house, we didn't watch that. I know some people have wonderful memories of Lawrence Welk, so perhaps that would be what you were watching. Hee Haw. Again, I know some people have very fond memories of Hee Haw. We did not watch that. So I don't know what I would have been watching at 7 o'clock. But at 8 o'clock, which would be prime time, we have a couple of really good choices. We have The Jeffersons, which I loved watching. It's Lionel who dented his father's van, but George blames himself, believing he hit a pedestrian during a terrible snowstorm. Sounds like just the kind of mix-up that would happen in a sitcom. And then we have Emergency, right? Johnny Gage and Roy DeSoto. So a TV news reporter and her cameraman sample the firemen's rigorous routine when they tag along on emergencies, which include rescuing an unconscious landslide victim and saving workers trapped by fire. Gage, played by Randolph Mantooth, who I thought was so cute. And, just so, DeSoto was Kevin Tighe. Kelly was Tim Donnelly. Okay, and then I don't recognize any of the guest stars. And then this is something I thought is interesting now. I don't think I would have watched it back then, but I'd love to find if it even exists anywhere. It's a show called Good Heavens with Carl Reiner. So Carl Reiner is back as Mr. Angel, granting the wishes of deserving human beings who have performed simple acts of kindness. In this episode, a good Samaritan is rewarded with a romantic encounter with a Hollywood celebrity, John Brockton. The encounter, however, is not quite what she bargained for. So Hugh O'Brien plays John Brockton. Susan Day plays Ellen. So this is one of those shows where a lot of people would guest star. Okay, I guess I'm going to revise my delight in this show. If Mr. Angel is indeed a celestial angel, I'm profoundly interested. If he's just a guy with a lot of money and resources and does nice things for people, less interested. If this is a divine show, interested. Earthy show, not so much. Although Carl Reiner, I pretty much would watch reading the phone book because he's always funny in everything he does. And then, of course, we have On a Clear Day You Can See Forever, the Barbra Streisand movie, which is in all likelihood what we would have been watching. Also is a series that I kind of remember called Doc. So Doc was played by Barnard Hughes. I don't know why. We must have watched this. I have a memory of this. Oh, it looks like on PBS they're showing Monty Python's Flying Circus, which we did not watch, but I know that many of you did. At the 9 o'clock hour, we have Mary Tyler Moore, which, if we weren't watching the Barbra Streisand movie, we were for sure watching this. So Mary's friends become worried when she starts dating a strikingly handsome man. They assume that such a dazzling exterior must be covering up a shallow character. This was first seen in September 1974. Oh, so it's a rerun. We'd still watch it. Hawaii Five-0, which we did not watch. Bob Newhart. So Howard is visited by his younger brother Gordon, a bird sanctuary warden who has a long history of taking things from Howard. And now he's enamored of Howard's girl, Ellen. I don't know why I'm laughing. I loved the different Bob Newhart shows, but I think this one was the funniest. This version of Bob Newhart. Okay, we've got Carol Burnett, which of course we were watching Carol Burnett on a Saturday night. She has the Jackson 5 and clown Emmett Kelly. Oh, I remember him. He always portrayed a clown with such sweetness. And they join Carol's charwoman character in pantomime. Well, that sounds good. And I mean, Jackson 5, awesome, right? Okay, we do have, I think, Saturday night, which is not called Saturday Night Live yet. It's just called Saturday Night, but it did air live. This must have been very early in its life cycle. Buck Henry is the host, and the Not Ready for Primetime Players. This may have been its first season or the second. It was probably very, very close. This is what I really want to pay attention to, the Midnight Special, which I did not watch back then, and we did not have a VCR yet. So I would not have known about the awesomeness of this show that I'm now going to share with you. So the Midnight Special, they would do live musical performances. And so this is who is on this episode of the Midnight Special. Popular music from the 50s through the 70s is spotlighted on this special edition of the series. So they're clips. Okay. You know what? I got really excited because I thought they were all there live. Okay, they weren't, but they're clips from when they did perform live. But still, this is a cool lineup. So, okay, sorry. I got really excited because I thought they were all performing live, like the Grammys or something. And that's not it. So reduce my enthusiasm level by about 60%. It's still cool though. Okay, so clips of the Beatles, Elvis Presley, Bob Dylan, Elton John, Joan Baez. Okay, I'm so disappointed now that this was not them performing live because I got so excited thinking there was like this great lineup. And then to have that dream kiboshed. They're clips. Clips are good. They're fine. They're lovely. But it's not what I thought it was. But I'm going to leave this part in though, just so you can experience what I experience when I go to record these podcast episodes. I don't know what is going to pour out of my mouth. So let's keep going. So Sunday morning, just assume I'm sleeping until noon. So we're just going to skip right ahead. For sure, 7 o'clock hour, which would be 6 o'clock in Chicago. Say it with me, Sunday night, we're watching 60 Minutes. For sure. But I will say it did have some competition. There was The World of Disney, which I have no memory of watching this particular movie. The Boy Who Talked to Badgers, like a whole movie, I guess. A young Canadian farm lad who seems to communicate better with animals than with people. And he is concerned about a hunted badger, and he wanders far from home. It sounds like he meets a lot of hardship looking for this badger. So I did like movies like this about animals, but I wouldn't have watched that. And then Jacques Cousteau, that we loved Jacques Cousteau in our house. And this episode is called The Fish That Swallowed Jonah. According to Jacques Cousteau, was probably 1,000-pound grouper and not a whale. Okay, I'm not even going to get into what that means. Okay, as if Jonah had really been swallowed and spit out. But he's talking about mythology, I guess, now, so it could be a grouper and not a whale. Okay, well, that'd be fine. I don't know that I would be very excited about that episode. But again, 60 Minutes is airing in our house. And now we get to prime time, which is really the good stuff. We've got Sonny and Cher, which for sure we watched. Sandy Duncan sings and dances in an elaborate aspirin commercial. And a roaring 20s gypsy opera. She competes with Cher for the Gypsy King's hand. Oh, this is a rerun. This was first telecast in 1972. So the networks at this point have got the reruns going because it's not Sweeps Week or whatever they call it. We have $6 Million Man, also a repeat. Steve investigates a security leak that has imperiled a top-secret nuclear experiment. I like the $6 Million Man. The Waltons. Ooh, it's a special Waltons because they have their own section in the TV guide. So I will have to flip ahead somewhere. Okay, we'll get to the Waltons. I'm not sure what's airing. Oh, I see. This was what was airing on Thursday. So they're airing. I got it. TV Guide, you are confusing me. So whatever episode is airing on the Waltons on Sunday also aired on Thursday or airs on Thursday, and TV Guide tells us what that is then. But since we are not at Thursday yet, we're just going to leave the Waltons for now. There is Abbott and Costello Meet the Killer, Boris Karloff. Again, as a child, I was scared by Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. I would not watch this movie. At 9 o'clock, we would be watching likely Kojak. My dad liked Kojak. McCloud was also on that I don't think we watched. On PBS, Upstairs, Downstairs, which was a classic. Again, we didn't watch it. At 10 o'clock, there's something called Bronk, which I do not remember at all. And Bronk is played by Jack Palance. I have no recollection of that at all. And then some documentaries. So I don't have any relationship to anything that is airing in the 10 o'clock hour. And not that I would have watched this back then, but at 11:30 at night, The Bachelor and the Bobby Soxer is airing, which I would watch now because it has Cary Grant in it. And pretty much I'll watch any movie Cary Grant is in. But as a 14-year-old, I wouldn't have cared. This would have been an old movie and I didn't care. You know, sometimes these things are acquired as we get older, right? So now we're going to flip over to Monday after school. I had shared with you in another podcast that I often stayed home sick from school because I found life to be overwhelming. And interestingly enough, you can reference this whole home conversation from this first part of the episode. But let's assume that I'm just tuning in at after about 3:30 when I'm home from school. So we've got Mike Douglas, right? I would always look to see who Mike Douglas and Dinah Shore had on. And Mike Douglas has Roger Moore as this week's co-host, which I would not have found compelling at all. No offense to Roger Moore, but as a 14-year-old girl, I didn't care. And among the guests are Lee Grant and her mother, composer Giancarlo Menotti. I would have cared about none of them at 14 years old. And then we have Dinah Shore. Oh, again, would have cared nothing about any of these people. Senator Barry Goldwater, for sure I wouldn't have cared. John Davidson, I could see him on Hollywood Squares. I wouldn't have to watch him on Dinah. Dick Clark, who I could see again if I wanted to on the Dick Clark American Bandstand, which I didn't watch anyways. And Leslie Gore. You'd have to get like a Donny Osmond or, somebody I could relate to for me to be excited, and none of these people excite me. Interestingly enough, there's another Mike Douglas episode listed later in the day on a different channel, and Gabriel Kaplan, who I knew not personally, but as the actor Gabe Kaplan from Welcome Back, Kotter, is on as a co-host. And that I would have watched probably, because Welcome Back, Kotter, he might have talked about John Travolta. And in syndication, listen, we've got good stuff going on, and that's likely what I would have watched. Happy Days, I would have watched that. Partridge Family, for sure. Well, even at 14, I think I would have watched Partridge Family. Oh, Merv Griffin, again, wouldn't have watched this. We have Liberace, Jimmy Walker, Clifton Davis, Roberta Peters. Again, I don't know that I would have felt compelled to watch that. Family Affair is airing, which at 14 I wouldn't have watched, but as a kid I loved that with Brian Keith. Okay, so another Dinah Shore episode I would have cared nothing about. Spiro Agnew. For those of you outside of the U.S., you may not know this, but Spiro Agnew had been the vice president of the United States under Nixon. And then he was found guilty of tax evasion. I just looked this up. This is why I remember all of this so clearly. I don't want you to think that Spiro Agnew is taking up this much space in my brain. I just looked this up on Wikipedia because I remembered who he was, but I didn't remember all the details. So apparently he got convicted of tax evasion and had to step down as vice president. And that's when Gerald Ford was made vice president of the U.S. under Nixon. And then when Nixon resigned, Ford became president. So now Spiro Agnew is discussing his new novel, The Canfield Decision, and offers views on the press and briefly talks about his resignation of the vice presidency. Also on the show are his wife, Judy. And sorry, there's more because that was plural. Also on the show are his wife, Judy, Paul Williams, and British singer Maxine Nightingale. I can assure you, I cared nothing about hearing what Spiro Agnew had to say. And also, by the way, I grew up in a Democratic household, so that should just give you a preview of what we thought of Spiro Agnew in the first place. But even if he had been a politician in our home we thought favorably about, I would still not care because I was 14 and I'm watching The Partridge Family. Okay, so, let's kind of just come on over to prime time now. Enough about waxing poetic about politics. Okay, listen, at 8 o'clock in prime time, we've got Rhoda. I loved Rhoda. Rhoda with Carlton the doorman. Remember? This is Carlton the doorman. Which, if you've never heard the joke, I just sound like an idiot now. But if you saw the show, you would be laughing. An old chum of Martin's, I don't remember who Martin is, reappears after many years, but is hesitant about renewing their friendship. The two had a falling out over their mutual attraction to Ida, who was Rhoda's mother, played by Nancy Morgenstern. And yes, I did remember that out of my brain. So this is what is being hoarded in my memory right now. So there's that episode. Okay, and then I guess John Davidson has his own variety show that is debuting here and now. As host of this 4-week variety series, John Davidson sings and dances and participates in comedy routines and banters with members of the studio audience, because we always want good bantering. So George Burns, Jimmy Walker, and Tanya Tucker are all going to be in this. And if John Davidson is not your cup of tea, this apparently was the golden era of variety shows, because you can also watch the Charo. Yes, the Charo variety show. A half-hour of music and comedy headlined by the Spanish-American entertainer Charo. So lots to choose from, of which I would have been watching for sure Rhoda. Given a choice between Rhoda, John Davidson, and Charo, Rhoda would be on in our house. And also, Rhoda was aired back to back with Phyllis, the other Mary Tyler Moore spinoff, played by Cloris Leachman. So in this one, haunted by Lars' sacred memory and worried that she may have forgotten how to be a woman, Phyllis is traumatized. Wait, I have to turn the page. Phyllis is traumatized at the prospect of going out on a date. Okay, I don't know the context of that, but okay. Also airing opposite that is the Andromeda Strain, which we would not have been watching. We were not about scary movies or horror movies in our house. Also airing Starsky and Hutch. I loved some Starsky and Hutch. I thought David Soul was cute. My bar was pretty low. I just needed somebody to be cute that I could fixate on. At 9 o'clock, we of course have All in the Family, brilliant television. We for sure would have been watching that. Thanksgiving dinner gets cold and tempers get hot as Archie and Mike spar over the religious training or lack thereof to be provided to Mike and Gloria's soon-to-be-born child. So that tells you where that is in the life cycle of this show. There's also a boxing special where Muhammad Ali is defending his world heavyweight title against European champion Richard Dunn. We never watched boxing in our house. We would not have watched that. Also on Saturday night was Maude, which we watched, but I don't remember loving. I think a lot of the Maude content went over my head at 14 years old. At 10 o'clock, we have Medical Center. Again, I thought Chad Everett was cute. We probably were watching that. And nothing else really interesting on at 10 o'clock, which is kind of sad for a Monday night. Now we get into late night, though. So on Johnny Carson, we have guest hostess, so he must be on vacation this week, Barbara Walters, is slated to welcome Ray Bolger, Ann Landers, and Edie Gourmet. I would probably not be up late enough to watch that. I'd be asleep by then. And a rerun of Beretta with the Cockatoo, so I liked that show as well. And we're not going to have a chance to go into Tuesday. We'll have to pick this up on another episode. But I will tell you that as I flip open to Tuesday, we do have a lovely insert for the Columbia Record and Tape Club. So I don't know how many of you remember that or joined that, but this was where you could get any 11 records or tapes for $1 plus shipping and handling. And then, of course, you would have to buy one a month at higher prices. But again, if you think about it, this is before we have the internet and Amazon. So most music buying, you would go to your local record store. Ours was Record City in Skokie, Illinois. For any of you who grew up locally, you will remember Record City, where you could buy a 45 or a vinyl, perhaps an 8-track, or a regular cassette was your cup of tea. And I'll read to you some of the albums you could choose from. We called them albums back then. And that'll give you a sense on what was hot in music in 1976. So we have Paul Simon's Still Crazy After All These Years, followed by Art Garfunkel's Breakaway, which tells us that at this point they are no longer Simon and Garfunkel. They are Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel having their independent careers, and I think I likely owned both of these albums. Okay, we have a bunch of artists I don't know. Chicago's Greatest Hits. I liked Chicago. We've got Barbra Streisand, who I did not have a real appreciation for at that point, but I love now. Okay, now we go into the inside fold. We have Barry Manilow and Captain and Tennille. Okay, I've just a really cute Captain and Tennille story for you. I actually have multiple Captain and Tennille stories, but this is the one I'm going to share with you now. I was at the grocery store yesterday in the self-checkout lane, and I don't know why, but they were playing music from this era in the store, and Love Will Keep Us Together came on. And the guy who was monitoring all the self-checkout lanes was clearly of my generation because he was singing the song. And I laughed. I said, we're of the same generation. I know every single word to this song, which I do. And there's another story about that song that I will have to save for a later date. And it involves Kevin Bacon. So good stories. So keep listening to Sleepy Bedtime Blessings podcast, where I will treat you to stories from my life that involve Captain and Tennille and Kevin Bacon. Good stuff coming your way soon. So, love will keep us together. Yes. They also have Willie Nelson and Paul Anka, who I would have cared nothing about. Let's see, what would I have been interested in? Tony Orlando and Dawn. I don't know that I would have purchased their music, but I certainly knew who they were. Bobby Vinton, I didn't care. ZZ Top, who of course is great, but I didn't care about them as 14 years old. Barry Manilow, probably I would have cared about. I would have probably, they do have some classical. So for instance, they have Vladimir Horowitz. So I may have gotten that for my parents because they would have liked that. I'm looking, they have Telly Savalas, Who Loves You, Baby. I had no idea he made an album. So that just, I don't know, that made me laugh. Wow, it's so interesting. I would have liked almost none of this music. Barry White, again, these are artists I have appreciation for now, but as a 14-year-old girl, I wouldn't have cared. Mac Davis, wouldn't have cared. Santana, wouldn't have cared. Donald Byrd, I don't know who he is. Hank Williams Jr., didn't care. Tammy Wynette, no country music. Helen Reddy, I just needed I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar. That's all I needed from her. Loggins and Messina. See, now I love Loggins and Messina. And I discovered them probably when I was a freshman in college. So at 14 years old, I wouldn't have cared. I don't know what my music was when I was 14 years old, but it's nothing available through this music club. The OJs didn't care. Glenn Campbell, don't care. I was probably listening to Partridge Family. I don't know. Maybe a little bit of Elton John thrown in there, who's really good, of course. Johnny Mathis. Again, I think these people are brilliant now. Didn't care then. Earth, Wind, and Fire, wouldn't have cared. The musical tastes of a 14-year-old girl, right? Before YouTube, before social media, before MTV, we were informed by Tiger Beat, right? And the radio stations. So I see artists here now that I would like, but I wouldn't have cared then. Oh, Eric Carmen, All by Myself. I think we probably would have had that album. That was a good song. Loggins and Messina, So Fine. Again, I would think that's good now. Wouldn't have gotten it then. Like, I would have been listening to John Denver. At some point, I don't know when John Denver hit it big, but when he did, I was all in on John Denver. But I don't see him here, so maybe he wasn't, he hadn't really hit his zenith at that point. Cat Stevens' Greatest Hits, Dan Fogelberg Captured Album. That must be early Dan Fogelberg, because I don't remember that one. And I loved Dan Fogelberg. I really, I guess in high school and college, he really got bigger. Jim Croce, I loved very much. Again, at 14, I don't know that I loved him. Okay, I'm still skipping. I'm not seeing anything that 14-year-old me would have been needing. Bruce Springsteen, Greetings from Asbury Park. Wouldn't have cared. 14-year-old me? No, I don't care. I would have been, at 14 years old, like what was, I'll have to go look this up. What was big in music back then? The best of Michael Jackson, Carpenters. I did listen to Carpenters then. Aerosmith. Again, I wasn't listening to any of this stuff. Hold on, I'm going to have to go. Give me a second. I'm going to go and look up what the top albums and songs were in 1976. So, the Billboard year-end Hot 100 singles of 1976 includes Silly Love Songs by Wings. Loved that song. I still think it's a fantastic song. Don't Go Breaking My Heart by Elton John and Kiki D. Disco Lady by Johnny Taylor. Oh What a Night, otherwise known as December 1963 by the Four Seasons. And this classic, Play That Funky Music by Wild Cherry. I still love that song. Play That Funky Music. 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover by Paul Simon. So that gives you a sense of what we were listening to, but I don't know that any of these albums would have gotten me excited. At 14 years old, I was probably just listening to WLS, which was the rock station in Chicago. WLS Chicago. I was listening to that. And so at that point, of course, I did not have a credit card nor the ability to join one of these music clubs. So I would have been just out of luck. But I would buy 45s, I think, with those little dongles that you put in the middle so you could play it on your record player. So that brings us through to Tuesday morning of this version of TV Guide, which will absolutely require another episode. And I hope you enjoyed these episodes as much as I enjoy making them for you, because it delights me to go into the Wayback Machine and just remember all of these parts of life. So I send love and light through all dimensions of time to whatever was going on in 1976. Life keeps going and moving, but somehow memories and experiences also get stored in the matrix with us. So I'm grateful to be able to share this with you. So, my beautiful friends, I wish you the sweetest of dreams. I hope that you are feeling the love that is streaming through for you. And I am so deeply grateful for the opportunity to share this time with you. So you rest well, and we'll be together again soon. And if you're still wide awake and you need some more content, there are over 130 episodes in the archive for you. So we've got lots of goodness. So we'll talk again soon. Thank you.